Ready? Is that us? Good morning, everyone. It's fantastic to see so many faces, and some of you not on video, but hopefully we'll come on to getting you later. Welcome to CCA's launch of our Excellence Awards for 2021-2022. And I'm delighted. My name's Anne-Marie Forsyth. I think I know quite a few of you on the call, but there's some of you I don't know, and you're very welcome if this is your first time at a CCA event. This has been a really tough year. I think all of us can acknowledge that. It's been horrific, actually, in some ways. But it's also been really energizing because so many great things have happened. So many good transformations have happened that people have, well, I suppose the phrase is, without the pandemic, we might not have done this. The big trick, obviously, now is to bring to the front the stuff that's excellent and to understand what really works and the things that we might decide don't work. And what we're really interested in as a network is sharing all those amazing experiences and amazing things that have worked really well so that we can all kind of see the benchmark rise. And over the last 15 years in these Excellence Awards, I think the one common theme has been every single year, the entrance to the awards have been better than the year before. It just gets better and better. And I think last year, even in amongst this, in amongst the pandemic, there were some fantastic entrants that I think everybody was really genuinely really surprised. So it's a fantastic privilege actually to be here today to launch this with you. It's a fantastic privilege to see so many of you actually keen to showcase. And I suppose the burning question really is, at the end of the day, how can I win? And today is all about explaining to you just what good looks like and what winning is. And to help us along with that, we've got our team of judges, some of our Excellence Awards judges, and our chair of the judging panel, Andy Menz. So I'm going to introduce them just in a wee while. But before I do that, I'm just going to share a couple of slides with you just to give you a little bit of background to the CCA Excellence Awards. And just I'll wait and see if we can slide a wee share. So the whole CCA Excellence Awards are based on the values of our CCA network, which has been around now for more than 20 years, in fact, approaching 25 years. And every time I say that, it makes me feel very old. So, but the values of those network have remained constant throughout everything, right from the early days of the sort of whole call center phenomenon right through to now, when we're really looking at the whole CX and hybrid models and everything else that's going around from today, the future of where we are. And those values are all around honesty as a network, integrity, definitely collaboration, which is probably really high, innovation, always seeking to innovate, always seeking to do things better, always seeking to just get ahead and be one step ahead of that debate. And of course, independence in thought, so that we're not moving in directions which don't necessarily represent the true collaboration and innovation. So those are just some of the values of the network. And in terms of the background, for those of you who don't know, and I know many of you have been involved in the awards for many years, but just as a reminder, they've been recognising and celebrating talent, initiative, innovation and best practice since 2006, so a long time ago. And it's a consistent process that's been built over the last 15 years. Independent peer-to-peer judging panel. We're really proud of that. It makes these awards really unique, actually, and we'll hear just a little bit about that after. Business-wide participation, collaboration and engagement across the whole business, led by customer operations. It highlights and raises the profile of customer operations throughout the rest of the business. Now, on that point, I would say that certainly over the many thousands of conversations that we've had since the beginning of pandemic, engagement levels, as you can imagine, have really increased. The one thing that's come to the fore very often is that people now appreciate the work that people do at the front line of customer service, because let's face it, everybody's working in this way. They're really seeing the challenges. And this morning, for example, in news is all the great debate about GP surgery is operating mostly by phone, and it's causing a lot of controversy. And I listened to a GP this morning say something that the public don't understand is that when they were in a waiting room and they saw 2 or 3 people, they could get a sense of what the queue was like. But now, when there may be hundreds of people waiting to access our services, the public are getting impatient because they think we're not working, they're not realising the extent of the demand. And I think it's really about this invisible hero stuff that the whole this whole industry, if you like, has grappled with since time and beginning. And it's so important to bring to the fore and to constantly reinforce and constantly communicate just how good and how progressive many of the initiatives and many of the programs are that we're judging. So highlighting and profiling the profile throughout the rest of the business, and of course, importantly, showcasing people, initiatives, achievements. Be proud of your successes. Sometimes when you're dealing with a lot of negativity, you're dealing with things not always working out the way that they should, you're dealing with the ills of the rest of an organisation or an angry customer base, it's tempting at times to think that we're not getting things right. But just looking at, again, many of the successes and many of the way that show has been on the road over the last year, I can tell you that from what we've heard, certainly from CCA Network, is the absolute incredible lengths that people have gone to provide brilliant services where they can and to learn fast from the mistakes that have been made. So that's really just the background to it. A couple of key dates. Deadline for entry, midnight, 26th of November, which is a little while away, but not that far away. We're planning to celebrate in person in Glasgow on the 30th of March 2022, date for your diary. And I'm not going to go through details just now, there's any amount of details on our website at global.com awards for full details, and everything's there that you need to know. So without further ado, I am going to hand over now for some words from the chair of our judging panel, Andy Menz. Andy, are you there? How are you?
I'm here, Anne-Marie. I'm good, thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Geneva in the background. So
indeed, not the most sunny day, and you can't see the mountains, but a great view either way anyway. And interestingly, in the other direction, there's tons of building work going on, which I guess gives some hope for the future. Because at the moment, I'm in a pretty empty building, so we're actually redesigning our floor space at the moment, in line with what we think will be a much more flexible working model whenever all the restrictions are lifted. So a real period of change. And I think, probably the question of our generation is, the future of work and how we'll work going forward. But enough of that. I think, we wanted to talk about the awards today. And first of all, just to say thank you to you, Anne-Marie, and also to you, Sharon, for the chance to speak to everyone this morning. And also, to be honest, for allowing me to be chair of the Excellence Awards panel. It's a role that I take very seriously and I really enjoy. So I just want to take a few moments to reflect on, why I believe the CCA Awards are so special, and personally, what's motivated me to spend many, many hours of my own personal time to judge these awards every year, especially as I haven't worked in the industry, for 10 years. And I think I've probably got sort of three main reasons that I think the CCA Awards are so special. And Anne-Marie, you've touched on those already. I think I'd start off with the CCA itself. It's not an organisation that exists solely to run awards. It's an industry body. It sets out standards by which excellence can be, judged. The CCA produced papers on best practice. And I guess if contact centres had existed 100 years ago, the CCA probably would be the guild of contact centres. They're here to help and guide those people that work in the industry. And so in that sense, I think they sit at the centre of the industry. I think secondly, and I would say this right, but the judging process is incredibly objective. Each submission is judged by a minimum of 3 of your peers. We work very hard to work with the judges, to train judges, to calibrate how we respond, how we mark those submissions. And ultimately, you're talking about a judging team who sadly have literally got hundreds of years of experience across the industry. So I think it's a very, very robust process. And the judges are highly experienced people who are your peers, who understand the challenges that you face, and I think are in a great position to assess who is the best of the best. And then finally, in terms of recognition, I can't remember the number. We worked this out a few years ago, but there are actually a relatively small number of awards every year. The process is extremely rigorous, and so for me, having somebody put forward for the awards, if you put a submission together and spend time to do that with relation to a colleague or a team, I think that in and of itself is fantastic recognition, that you make that effort to recognise the work that they're doing. If that submission gets shortlisted, then that's even more powerful recognition of the work that they're doing. And then finally, of course, and this can't happen for everybody, but if you are lucky enough and good enough to win, then for me, that's the industry equivalent of a gold medal at the Olympics or an Oscar over in Hollywood. I think I many years ago have submitted applications for judging. I've got people through to shortlist. I've seen the impact that can have on people, and so I think it's a fantastic form of recognition, and I think everybody should feel recognised and proud, when they're put forward for a CCA award, given everything that goes into that. And I think from a personal perspective, just to close, why do I do this? I mean, it's lunchtime for me now. Even just an example, I try and do everything in my own time. And as I mentioned before, I haven't worked in the industry for over 10 years. I don't even live in the UK. So although it is a global awards, obviously, but so why do I do it? Well, I mean, for me, even though I do very different work these days, I think I can always learn something from the people I judge. And I guess as a leader, it's very, very engaging, interesting and stimulating, and quite uplifting, to be honest, to listen to people who, know what they're doing, who are doing it well, and show so much passion for their people and their customers. And so that for me is a really motivational experience when I get the chance to read, but also then to talk at the second stage, to talk to these people about the great work that they're doing. And I think all of those things in combination really for me are why I think the CCA awards are the ultimate accolade in your industry. So that's really why I feel passionately about them. And I think just to stress that point about my engagement and how uplifting it is to hear people talking passionately about what they do. I'm going to introduce a winner who I had the good fortune to judge last year with her entry. And really what stood out for me in terms of that submission was the work, of course, that was going on. We need to see evidence of qualitative work, but the pride and the passion that went along with that was absolutely fantastic, and ultimately resulted in this person winning the category. So without further ado, I want to introduce Lethea from Camelot, who's going to talk about her submission last year and what it takes to be a winner. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. That's amazing, isn't it? I mean, hearing it from the point of view of the judge is really good, and hearing it from your point of view, guys, in CCA. But I have to say, from the point of view of the winner, the amazing opportunities that have been unlocked through that is extremely amazing. So I'm very humbled and very shy. So it's great to be here to be able to talk to you about what it takes to write an award-winning submission. I'm not going to tell you how I did it in my category specifically, because it might not relate to all of you. So I've kept it very, very generic today. I hope that you can all hear me okay. If there's any problem at any point, just pop a message in the chat, or just unmute yourselves and let me know. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and share my screen very quickly. If I can have the host give me permission to do that. Can Marie or Sharon allow me to do some screen sharing?
Try again, Lethea, that should be it.
There it is, perfect, lovely, thank you so much for that. So hopefully you're now all seeing a CCA Awards Writing an Award-winning submission. I am the training and quality manager for the National Lottery. So, we had a very special year for our organization last year. It was hard, like it was for everyone else, but also we had some added responsibilities, which I'll talk about as we go along. Now, when you were doing things, you don't necessarily realize how you're doing them. So this was a very good moment for me to reflect back and think how we actually did it. Because to be honest, we did it by intuition a little bit. The previous year, we had already put some submissions for CCA, and actually in my category on training and skills, we ended up being shortlisted. And that was a great starting point and learning point for us, because we got the feedback from the judges, and I had the pleasure of sitting down next to the final judge in my category during the awards ceremony, who then gave me even further tips, which was amazing. So from that, we took all of our learnings and we applied them this year. So the way I'm thinking about the process of writing an award-winning submission is having 3 steps in it: planning, creating, and reviewing, being all of them particularly, equally important, if you like. But then there's a final step in there at the bottom that says prepare for phase 2. If you're going to be in it, you're going to be in it to win it. Now, you can tell I work for the lottery, don't you? If you're in it, you have the chance of winning it. So make sure that you prepare yourself for a potential encounter with a judge after the shortlisting process. So I'll just break this down a little bit more, and I'll relate it to the way we approach things. I say we because I have the pleasure of having Mark Whitley in our Camelot team also, who has done submissions before and has already been runner-up several times. So he does have a very good ability in doing this, and he's been a massive support to me. So that's why I'll say we quite a lot, because Mark was a key part of this process for me. So planning like a winner is about choosing your story. So we all might think that, we all do things really well in our organizations, but what is it that differentiates us from the others? What is it that we've done that is special about us, about my team, about my project? Why do I believe this is award-winning or award-worthy? So it's very important that you choose the right storytelling technique, if you like, for your submission. What are the things within your story that are particularly important? What are the messages that you want to keep going back to within your submission that then have to also be brought up by that evidence that you provide? So can you show the why, the how, and the what through the evidence that you're delivering? And I'm sure you've all struggled, like I did, with the word count. We all have to talk about the word count. We all would love to talk endlessly about the things we have done and achieved. But the reality is you have to find that balance between what you tell in your story in the submission versus what you tell through the evidence. And I think in this case, the evidence, and that's what I learned this year, and that's what we did very differently this year versus previous years, the evidence is particularly important. The quality and the quantity of what you submit is very important. So if I just move on into a little bit more in depth into the story angle, you have to really, really, really decide, how do you want the judges, how do you want anyone reading that submission to perceive your story? So here I had some bullet points that I took from how data insight people choose the angle of how they're going to report to management. And this is sort of a similar thing. You might decide that what you've done was particularly relevant because of the scale of the impact or the scale of what you did. Maybe you're an international company who has offices outside of the UK, and it's about how the program was globalized. There's a lot of things that can go into this scale item. The same with change. Was it about driving a huge change in the organization? How you did it from the bottom up, from the top to bottom? How did you manage those? Ranking, how you compared to the other organizations, variation, how different you were. So you have in there many, many different angles that you can give to the same story. And that can make the story play completely differently. And that can make the story be completely more relatable or less relatable. But the thing here is you have to have a story that you believe in. So Andy was talking about passion and about how we came across during our submission, but that's the reality. You have to be passionate about what you're doing and what you're saying. You have to be the first one to believe it. And then you have to know what it is that makes it special. Why are you so proud of that story? So that you can then start linking all of your answers and your evidence into that key message and that key angle that you're giving to your story. Now, you have done your planning. You know what your story is. You know who you wanted to write it. Now I am passionate about what I do. So this year, I asked to write my own story. The previous year, Mark helped me and we were shortlisted. So he did a cracking job. But this year I said, look, it's my team, it's my project. Let me bring it to life because I think I can do this. And with his help and my passion, I guess, we managed to get an award-winning submission. So make sure that whoever is writing it is feeling it, essentially. So we go into the creation, and I did have a very personal approach here. I don't do it in a typewriter, but I do try to write the submission into a format that allows me to be comfortable, as opposed to going straight into the CCA website and start building it in there. So what I do is I put it normally in just a Word document that I can share with others so they can add comments and give me feedback. I just go for it. I put the questions in there, I put my folder, I start grabbing everything that I own, everything that I have that relates to the story that I'm going to tell, all of the evidence. I ask my MI teams to provide some extra reporting because hopefully by then we've seen some extra impacts of what we've done. So I started building this folder and I started building this Word document, and I put no limits to it. You can tell already I am a very talkative person. Shy but talkative, and I do like to talk about what I do and what we've achieved. So I will just put everything in there. One thing that I really liked about the submission this year, which I didn't notice last year, was the whole context piece. And I think with the COVID situation we had, that was very important. And that also helped me set the tone of my story. So a lot of it's all about how you use the different questions to make sure that you're telling the story and as opposed to repeating yourself constantly. Whilst you might be driving the same point again, and again, you still want to make sure that you are expanding on your story through the different questions and answers. So I wrote it like I had no count limit. And then you have to pause and breathe. And this is where I say I normally would call Mark and say, Mark, what the hell? How are they expecting me to write everything that I've done and our team has done that is so wonderful and amazing in these many thousand words? Because I've probably written 4,000 words over the word count allowed. So I have a little cry, I have a little pause and breathe. And then I go back and say, okay, now I've written what I think I need to be telling. How can I change this so that I mix it with my evidence? So where does the evidence fit so that I don't have to write 300, 400 words, where I can use just a bullet point that creates that enough mystery and enough, it makes the judge want to go and open that piece of evidence to check what Lucia is talking about here. So you start creating that mystery and that bringing the judges into your evidence and managing the evidence with a submission in a very flowy, easy to read way. So once I've done that, I also look for bullet point opportunity. So I look for bullet point opportunity because bullet point is probably your biggest word saving technique, isn't it? So where you have something that you've done in a series of steps, where you have a list of stakeholders that got involved, where you have a list of results, it's all very important that we list things, achievements, processes, all of that. So bullet points will be your best friends when you are working in these submissions. And then in those bullet points, that's where you say evidence on this code, whatever it is, so that the judges have an easy way to find the actual proof of what that meant and what it was. Now, this is very important to me. What is evidence? And it's something we all wonder, right? And CCA are very clear. They don't hide it for us, that if you try to tell the story in the evidence, so using the evidence to continue to answer the question, as opposed to using the evidence to show the proof points of what you've done, they will disqualify you. And I'm sure that judges here will confirm that that happens, and it's fair enough. But it is true that I do classify evidence in like two big buckets. So one will be business documents that show a process. You can put in your evidence things that have been shared with leadership, things that where you have said, okay, this is the process we followed, 1, 2, 3, and here is the slide that showcases how that process was shared with leadership. And you might have some evidence in there of how the process actually worked by putting some documents in there that show the actual doing of it. Now, the other bucket that I have for evidence is the showing the outcome. So this is where your charts, your infographics, your business reports, your anecdotal feedback comes into place. So if a very important part of your story is about how you work together with the business, then you will want to have stakeholder reviews, stakeholder comments, even pictures of your stakeholders working together. So that's the sort of documentation that I would use to give my story a little bit more importance and a little bit more relevance for the judges to look at. So as much as evidence quantity will be important, the quality of it will also be. This can make or break your submission. That's what I have learned in my process. Everyone wants to know how we have applied what we said we had done. So I've decided to bring a couple of examples of the evidence that we used in our submission, just to show you. And I know this is about training and skills, so it might not apply the same way to the ones that you might have done. But this is an example where we put the process, so how we actually went about redoing our training to make it into virtually easy, virtually deliverable. We wanted to deliver our training virtually, but we didn't want to remove the existence of facilitators. Still, we wanted to use new design principles, technology, and then we went into the delivery and the review and improvement of what we had done. So this is a very quick slide, piece of evidence that contains in itself actual working documents that we've used. So it has Jamboards from Google. It has the design principles that we shared with the team. It has some of the renewed logos and branding that we used. It has some of the techniques that we used within the training, and it has some of the proof of the confidence and the questions that we were asking the guys pre and post training. So this is very hands-on kind of evidence. This is how it all worked. And then we have another tool that we use for evidence was, well, this is all about training, but there are things that complement the training, especially when you're remote, and communication becomes key. So this is our communication strategy within Camelot Customer Operations. So we were able to supplement not just the importance of the training, but the importance of information while you're working remotely and how it all came together. So we didn't necessarily explain this one by one in the submission because it wouldn't have been appropriate, but it was a very, very good extra bit to add on top. Anyone asking any questions out there? No? Okay. So just another example, and this is more about the impact and the outcome of things. You can see in here, I've hidden the numbers. Unfortunately, I'm not able to share much because of the process we are going through at the moment in Camelot. But this would have been very powerful because in that context piece, we did say what the company set themselves up to do. And what this is doing is then linking that golden thread into the company objectives and showing that it was through training that we achieved these things. So just to give you another example where we are then focusing on the outcomes of the impact we had. Now, reviewing, very quick, take a final look at your work, at your submission, commit to the word count this time, look for wordsmithing, look for these bullet points that I've mentioned before. I did this and I don't regret it a bit. I actually think it's what helped massively for us to win this time was use expert advice. So I went to our public relations team who constantly share messages with press through the marketing department also. And 2 people looked at my submission and they made it amazing. They found the perfect words. They found the perfect messages that actually linked to the things that the National Lottery had been telling in papers and news all over the country. So that made the submission even more relevant. And then once you're ready and once you have that word count under control, go to the CCA site and make sure that you have answered every single question and that you have added the evidence in a way that is easy to find, easy to follow, and tells the story for you. Double check it all before clicking submit. We've all had technical issues. Let's make sure that doesn't bring us down at the very end. And then if you are in it to win it, which I hope you are, then start prepping. Start thinking about your thank you speech, but also start being open-minded about the feedback that might come back. It's very important to me, this feedback, for two reasons. Number one, because it will help me prepare for the second phase. But number two, because it comes from other experts in the industry. And I really appreciate that. And I'll take it and I actually use it for our everyday work, not just for us to gear towards winning an award. So it's very important for me to look at that and see what's coming. And then put together the evidence and find the gaps in the areas that need strengthening. As you will be asked about the feedback areas when you face your judge. It could be things like innovation. It could be things like stakeholder involvement. It could be things about the value or the impact that you drove. It could be things about how you link your award to the goals of the organization. I have always found the feedback very fair and very well written so that you know what you need to cover with your judge. Now, having said this, you will have to prepare to meet your judge. Make sure that you have the answers to the questions and to the feedback that you have been given, but also make sure that, and this is very important, you let the judge lead it, okay? Because we're also excited. Sometimes we just take over, and I know Andy might say that is precisely what you did, Lucia, but you want to listen to the questions that the judges have, because there's limited time and you have to respect the time because everyone needs to get their part done. But by being prepared, you'll know what you can bring up and when you need to bring it up and which are the key messages to discuss. So let the judge lead the conversation, respect the times and enjoy it. I have found all of the experiences with CCA, especially during the second phase when you get to meet these judges, are very, very, very good. I have always felt very recognized just for the fact of having put a submission through and even more being finalists. That has been an amazing feeling all across all of my experiences with CCA. So it's definitely an enjoyable situation. And then just make sure that before you let your judge leave, you make any excuse whatsoever to bring back that key message that you wanted them to leave with. That is what makes or breaks your story. So just make sure that you have your key points ready for when you're saying goodbye, just to remind you, this is why we did what we did, and this is why we are so proud of that. So I hope that is helpful. I hope that tells you a little bit of how to approach it. Evidence, evidence, evidence. If there's one thing you're going to take out from here, that would be my one key point. Make sure you have strong evidence, because that's what brings things to life. And I don't see any questions on the chat, Sharon. I don't know if anyone has any that they want to unmute and just ask.
Everybody's very shy.
Just a bit of feedback from Derek. So thank you, Derek, for that. No questions, but really helpful, particularly around utilising colleagues from outside your working group for input.
Yeah, I think the sort of old adage about luck and winning can be dispelled. I think that phrase, the harder you work, the luckier you become, is what seems to be coming through from Lucia. She's enjoyed the process, Lucia. That's what's coming through, I think, isn't it? You enjoyed the process. You've
absolutely
brought it to life. I love the part when you said, I told my own story. I thought that was fab. But then obviously used somebody to help you wordsmith it, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's your story. And that's very different from getting somebody else to write your story, because then you risk a little bit of, you risk losing a bit of the authenticity, yeah? So,
definitely.
Yeah. And that other interesting point there, let the judge lead. The enthusiasm, it's a bit like the word count, isn't it? You've got to stick to the word count. It's there for a reason. And then let the judge lead. So you can be enthusiastic, but you know your enthusiasm is bringing this to life, bringing it to the point of the judge.
Yes, I can see in there we have a question from Jason that says, what was the biggest hurdle or obstacle when pulling the nomination together? I think the biggest for us, and is this very specific for us, Jason, was that we are going through a very important process at the moment with Camelot and the renewal of our license for the National Lottery, where we are up in competition with many other organizations who are brilliant organizations, well-known organizations. So We have our confidentiality levels at the moment are through the roof. So our biggest obstacle at that point was that we had to have everything approved by the business. So we had to get extra time. Plus, we couldn't necessarily talk about the specific numbers. We had to find a way of giving a sense of what we had achieved. By saying, we increased it by 40%, as opposed to saying we went from X to Y. So confidentiality was very key for us. And we know that all of the judges are under NDA, and we have wonderful experience with CCA and never had an issue. But still, as a company policy, we had to follow those things very to a T. So that was one of the biggest issues we had, being creative around the confidentiality levels that we currently have to deal with in our organization. That was the greatest obstacle of all.
Yeah, interesting.
Oh, and a question about celebration. I love celebration. We were all in different places. I had trainers doing training. My quality team, who get very involved in training, were doing some bits, but I did send them all the link to the YouTube live thread that you guys had on while we were going through the award-winning ceremony. And very interestingly, some of them were in YouTube, some of us were in the live thread here in Zoom. So we were there was a little delay between some of us. And so it was amazing because it was Alan Dedicott's voice, actually, which is the voice of the balls, like we call him in the National Lottery. And to have Alan Dedicott say Camelot when we won, it was amazing. It was the best feel ever. So all I know is that I jumped, my husband jumped, and the people from the team who were watching it in YouTube got it slightly later. So I was waiting to see when they would get it, and the amount of messages that came through, and we all started calling each other. It was just brilliant. We started calling each other. That's how we did it. And then what we decided to do was to bring the award to the office and start taking pictures of everyone for our newsletters and things like that. My team are not one that enjoy big celebrations. We believe in the engagement happens every day and how we work together. So we didn't actually do a big celebration. All we did was just get together, enjoy the award, take pictures, and write articles for the business to shout why we are amazing and award winning. You have in there, did you talk about anything that was still in flight, and what was your approach? Whenever I have done that before last year also, there are always things that are ongoing, aren't they? But I think that's where your use of the evidence is very important, where you have to balance what are the things that are happening and what are the things that we have achieved versus the medium and long term. I must admit, it's easier making a submission of something where you already have mid and long-term results, because it's in training in particular, things take time to be proven. So for me, it's easier to have something that has been almost done. And yes, you might be in the process of reviewing it. And I think the judges will value the fact that you just didn't do it and done, that you are continue to review and drive that improvement. So it's worth talking about things that are still happening and why they're happening, and how you are pushing yourself to continue to improve, but still have the evidence to show what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that why being in very, very big letters there.
Excellent. Okay, I think, well, thanks for that, Lucia. I mean, I think that you've had probably fewer questions because you've explained everything absolutely beautifully. Amazing.
It was a training award, wasn't it? It was a training award.
It was fantastic. It was. I mean, I'm quite overwhelmed by the passion that you've had in there. We've got some judges online, so I think it might be quite useful for just to run a few questions past the judges, so that we can really kind of just ask. We've got some common questions that come up year on year. Sharon's put them together, so I'm going to hand over to Andy, and we've got our judging panel. We've got Mark Hames, Katie Downs, Catherine Lennon, Mark McMahon, and they're all going to be around just to answer a few questions. So Andy, are you okay to handle some questions to judges just now? Is that going to work?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm good. Anne-Marie,
okay,
thank you.
Brilliant, thanks.
Great. Okay, so just before we get into that, I just wanted to pick up on something that was in the text box there from Joe, which related to I guess the pride and the recognition that you can give out through this process, and how exciting that can be, and really just to restate the point to everybody that's listening, if you are wanting to recognise somebody in your team. If you are proud of something that you've done, then please put those entries forward. The awards are again 30 March next year. That's going to fly by. We're sponsored by Polly and Twilio. We're very grateful for their support. We couldn't do it without them, and we think it's going to be a great awards. And I think just to touch on Anne-Marie's point from earlier, every year the standard gets better. And so we want to try and help you. It's almost shooting ourselves in the foot in a way. We want to try and help you get the standard better. And hopefully by answering some of the standard questions in the next session, we can do that. So we've got the judges online, as Anne-Marie alluded to. And let me just access the first question. So this is a question for Mark Haynes. Mark, why are the awards important?
Thank you, Andy, and good to see everybody today virtually. So it's great to see so many people attending this session. It just shows you how important it actually is to our industry sector. So to me, why are the Excellence Awards important? I think the clue is in the title, really. The word excellence really signifies a lot to me, and it is a little bit about the creme de la creme. It's about being able to celebrate success in our business, in our industry sector. And I think the key word is around recognition for people, for the teams, and also for the organisation as well. And there are obviously some awards where partners are involved in that as well. So the key bit is around having done something in the previous 12 to 18 months, being prepared to talk about it, and as Lucia said, tell the story about what you've done, and be prepared therefore to be recognised, because I think one of the big powers that we've got in our industry is around the recognition and celebration that we can do. Pretty much, especially whilst we've all been working virtually, it's been a lot harder, but our world is a difficult world, and sometimes I think some of our other industry sectors don't recognise the importance of what we do, and it's great to be able to celebrate and recognise people from those different sectors. So to me, and I think Lucia mentioned this about the opportunities as well. So why are they important? It's a springboard to the future. Really, really is. I've known individuals who have won awards and teams that have won awards that have gone on to bigger and better things, both within their own company and with other organisations as well. And I think it gives people that motivation, that stimulus to be able to do something different in the future years. And I think when certainly on the judges' side, and when you're actually there at the awards ceremony, it's the ability to network and to learn from others as well. So by putting yourself up for an award, you also automatically get that ability then to talk to others, to network, to find out what those real best practices are. And many individuals and organisations have then taken to the stage afterwards in future years and told a story for half an hour, certainly at the awards ceremony as well. And it's great being an ability to get involved in wider work as well. Host events, whether it's through webinars or actually on site as well. And that all comes with the kudos of actually putting in for the awards and hopefully being successful. And I think I just conscious of time, Andy, just finish off by saying that the gala dinner and the award ceremony itself is absolutely fantastic. It is an industry sector leading event, and that evening is really, really special. So whether you get a winner or you just actually get shortlisted and nominated, it's great just being there and seeing the depth of the talent that we've got within our industry at this moment in time. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Mark. No, I think that's a great answer, and I haven't looked actually for the flight schedules for the 30th of March yet, because I really do enjoy the awards ceremony, but sometimes I'm on a flight at 6 o'clock the following morning, which isn't the best planning going. But no, great answer, Mark. Thank you. Second question, I'm going to put this to Katie Downs. Katie, what value does peer review bring to the judging process?
Thanks, Andy. I think it's a really good question. I think it's kind of the essence of working and engaging with the CCA anyway, but getting that best practice, getting that insight, finding what different sectors but same industry, finding out what people are doing. And I think having that peer review as part of the judging process really helps that empathy and putting ourselves in your shoes, reading your applications. We've all felt the same pain points. I remember reading submissions from last year around getting 1,000 people working from home in 2 weeks because of the pandemic. I understand the pain that must have been. I understand the size of that. So I think being able to have that peer review really helps us understand. I think the last year it has been incredibly difficult to create those surprise and delight moments for customers who are having really difficult times in their lives. And whatever sector, it's about having that human contact and that human connection. So I think we can see that. I think we're inspired by reading those submissions as well. So as a kind of selfish point, if anybody does want to be a judge as well, please do let Sharon know, because honestly, reading the submissions, they are the best of the best, and they are kind of what you think is the best in your company as well. So there's just so much inspiring stories in there as well, which I really enjoy. I think it's also that, and I think Lucia mentioned it earlier, is that respect and recognition. We're peers, we're doing the same roles, we've got the same pain points, we've got the same challenges, and I think having that peer part of the process really helps. Kind of that empathy really helps us understand what's going on, and just kind of brings us all closer together as a community as well. So I definitely think that it's beneficial. And like I said, if you'd like to be a judge, I'm sure Sharon will get in touch with you. So thanks, Andy. That's where my thoughts are.
No, brilliant. Thanks, Katie. And you know, I mean, I stressed at the start there how much I've enjoyed being involved, even though I'm not in the industry anymore. And I think, you know, a number of the challenges that people have faced over the last year have been consistent, whatever industry you work in. So great. No, thank you, Katie. So our own Sharon Johnson next. Sharon, how important is it to provide feedback on every submission?
Well, I'm not a judge, just to put that out there, but this is just I have no influence at all in any of the submissions. And I think Lucia touched on this and probably could bring it alive a bit better than myself. But when a person agrees to be a judge, they agree in advance that part of their role really is to provide constructive feedback on any submission that they are asked to review. And there's two parts or two levels to the judging process. That first level involves each submission being reviewed by 3 separate judges from 3 different organisations. Each judge reviews the submission and allocates a score using a scoring framework just to keep the consistency there. And they then submit comments and feedback relating to specific parts of their submission. This feedback is then shared with all applicants once that level 1 judging process is complete. So what you're basically receiving is 3 separate opinions on how clearly the submission has been written. So where there might be gaps in the detail, maybe there's not enough evidence to back up a particular claim or a statement, or maybe something just doesn't make sense to the judge. When the applicant receives this, at that point, they will know whether their submission has made it to the shortlist or not. If it has made it to the shortlist, then this feedback becomes really, really important. As well as the applicant receiving the feedback, so does the judge, who will then be leading the second and the final stage of the process. It's really, and I think Lucia picked up on this earlier, it's really, really important to take on board what the feedback says and be ready to use it to improve and maybe enhance what's already contained in your submission. So really, it's a bit of a helping hand to let you see where the weak points might be, and it's really to help you with that final stage. For those that are maybe not so lucky to make it through to the shortlist, the feedback is still really relevant and useful. So use it to help with future submissions, and maybe it might also explain why you've not been successful. So use that for another entry, and just use it to celebrate and improve what you're doing, I suppose.
Great, thanks, Sharon. And I think from a judge's perspective as well, we know we've touched on that, but certainly when you go into the verification call stage, I often say to people, we're not there to catch people out. I think the feedback gives us that opportunity to drill a bit deeper, to get evidence. I mean, ultimately, we're looking for the submission to score the most appropriate and best score that it can. So it's super useful in that context. And in my experience, normally leads to a higher score, because then the submissions, the people that supporting submissions are able to answer the questions that we have for them in a more detailed way. So very, very important there. Next question is for Catherine Lennon. You're a judge, but also an applicant. In your opinion, how robust is the judging process?
Hi, Andy, and thank you very much to the CCA for having me today. I suppose my own first experience of CCA judging in particular was as an applicant a number of years ago, and at the time I remember thinking that there was a huge amount of detail and validation required for the process as a first-time applicant. But what that does, I suppose, is allow you to tell your story. And that's something that's consistent and has remained right the way through to today. It's very much about giving somebody the opportunity to tell their story. And since then, I've become involved in the first stage of judging and the second and subsequent stages as well. So there's a huge amount of personal time dedicated by the judges to support the process and to support the industry. And they do that because they're really passionate about the industry and they want to drive it forward and they want to understand, what everybody else is doing and what good looks like. And I suppose we see that year on year, that the standards increasing all the time. And you can really see the judges' passion and commitment to the industry coming through in the feedback. So it's definitely true when Sharon was saying the feedback at the first level supports the next level judges, and people go into great detail. They take an enormous amount of time to understand the questions, the criteria, to read all of the evidence that's submitted, and to really sit and think and judge each applicant against each other and against the criteria. And understand what one is really standing out for you, what one is really driving forward. So, judges are bringing all of their own experience to the process, but it's really, I think, back to that element of it being peer-to-peer. Because it is scored peer-to-peer, the judges are particularly robust in saying this is the way forward for our industry and driving those increasing standards. As Mark said, it's very much a springboard to the future. And that definitely, I think, comes true in the judging. It is particularly robust because we are trying, each of us and every one of us, to drive that industry forward. And that's very evident, I think, in the judging process, right the way through to, the validation of the interviews and the questions that you go to and the prep that's put into that as a judge to understand and to try and bring out and understand the true depth of your story and allow you the space to deliver that. So I personally find it a particularly robust process. It takes an awful lot of effort as a judge, as it does as an applicant. And that's important as a judge, that you're matching the level of effort that an applicant has put in. It's a privilege to judge, and certainly of all of the judges' sessions that I've been to, that passion and commitment definitely comes through.
Thanks, Catherine. I know I mentioned before that I entered submissions in the past. I've never won, so if you want some degree of integrity score, that's got to be it, right? Okay, so I know we're very short on time now, Mark. Mark, how important is it to have a good structure to your entry, including easy to follow appendices?
Thanks, Andy. Hi, everyone. I'll be as quick as I can. I think the theme of today is telling a story. But the structure is almost as important as the content of the story, because you can lose your story if you don't have a great structure. I think the CCA criteria allows for a natural flow of a story in any case, but make sure you're sticking to that. The judges want to hear the story. They want to hear your journey from the beginning to what you've achieved. So try and make it interesting. Include some challenges, because not everything goes straightforward, as we all know. So get them in there. Put some feelings in there as well. We'll love to read about that, and just keep the flow consistent throughout. And the appendices link into it hugely. Don't use an appendix to increase your word count. Use it as evidence, as Luthia mentioned earlier in the call. Put your achievements in the submission, but then back it up with appendixed evidence. Great example from Luthia before. It's an opportunity to be visual. It's quite wordy entering a submission, but it's a great opportunity to be visual as well and bring the story to life. And for appendices themselves, try and keep it to no more than 5 or 6 and link it in clearly to the submission where you can. As mentioned, judges do this a lot of the time in their own time voluntarily. So if you can keep the appendices to a lower number, that would be a massive help as well. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Mark. And I think that's a really, really good point. You've got to try and make, it's a very objective process, but I think you've got to try and make scoring as easy as possible. And not risk the judge missing a vital piece of evidence. Because we're short on time, I was going to go to Mark with another question. I'll just jump in with my question, and then I think maybe each judge can give one piece of advice to the applicants, given the time we've got left. My question was, has there ever been a time when 2 entries are neck and neck? How do you decide who wins? We look at that in great detail. There have been occasions where that has happened, and I think we probably follow 2 streams there. If we look back at all of the scores, and if, for example, 2 entries scored consistently with each judge at each stage on every category, then we'd realistically look at the possibility of maybe having a joint winner. And I think there have been a few rare occasions when we've done that. Another option open to us is if we see some differences there in terms of different judges may have scored slightly differently, or across the two submissions that we're comparing, you know, one might have done better at the written stage, one might have done better on the verification stage. Sometimes we might bring in another judge just to have a review and see if they can draw out any subtle differences that would allow us to award one with the winning prize, obviously, and then somebody with a, you know, highly recommended. So it's a case by case basis, but we have got some broad principles that we would apply there. And as I say, very rarely we would award to both. But so hopefully that answers that question. I'm just realising there's nobody for me to come back to. It's me. But just very quickly, one piece of advice for the audience. What would your one piece be, Mark?
My one piece would be about being really honest in terms of the achievements that you've got as a result of what the entry. So your outcomes, be outcome focused.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Katie?
My piece of advice would be tell us the story and help us understand it, but really kind of put your best foot forward.
Great advice. Catherine?
I think it would be to understand the award criteria and to read the question. So sometimes, you know, there's information in there that doesn't actually relate to the question. So it's to make sure that the information is relevant to the question being asked. Absolutely.
There's nothing more frustrating as a judge when you know someone's doing a really good job, but the submission isn't telling that story in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mark, thanks, Catherine.
Remember why you're entering it. So sometimes you might get stuck, draw a blank, struggle with motivation to complete the award, or just get in that little bit of a rut. So just remember why you're entering, and that should give you the motivation to get you through and put in a really great submission.
Great. Thanks, Mark. And I think that's really, really important because we talked about passion earlier, and I don't think anybody could have missed the passion that Thea showed for her submission. And I think from me, just coming off the back of that, it's just all about time. I think if you want to recognise somebody, or indeed recognise yourself and give yourself credit for the great work that you're doing, you've got to make time to do that. And I think if you do other stuff, you are simply prioritising process above people. So whether it's yourself, whether it's the team, whether it's an individual, give yourself time to make sure that you're able to put forward the best submission, because that's the best form of recognition I think that you can give. And I know it's difficult for all of us, but I think as a priority, if you're going to do this, then give it your best shot. Back to you, Sharon and Anne-Marie.
Anne-Marie, you need to take yourself off mute.
God, heavens above. I haven't done that since the very beginning. Okay, so thanks to everybody. Thanks to the chair. That was a fantastic presentation. Thanks to Andy for being. I think I've learned a lot, and I've been doing this for years and years and years and years. I hope everybody has too. Good luck to everyone. I suspect we'll be running a few more of these sessions. Just a bit of really, really useful, and I suspect there'll be more things that people will have. So very open to having further sessions if people feel that would be valuable. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your day. Get thinking about how you can display your excellence, and we really look forward to receiving those awards. So thank you very much to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.